Jake Morrison wiped the grease from his hands and looked up at the massive ships floating above Nexus Prime. He had never seen so many different alien vessels in one place. His own cargo ship sat broken in the repair bay with a blown engine that would take days to fix. Jake was stuck on the galaxy's most important world during the biggest event in 3,000 years. The Galactic Emperor was dead. Every species in known space had sent their most powerful leaders to Nexus Prime for the choosing ceremony. Jake only knew about it because his friend Carlos Martinez had explained everything. While pacing around the repair bay in his fancy diplomatic robes, "The Throne of Eternity will choose the next Emperor," Carlos said for the 10th time. "It has been waiting for someone worthy for 3 millennia. Every great leader in the galaxy will try to claim it today." Jake nodded and went back to cleaning his tools. He was just a cargo pilot who delivered supplies to remote stations. Politics and ancient thrones were not his business. His business was keeping his ship running and making sure people got the food and medicine they needed. "You should come with me," Carlos said suddenly. "I need someone to carry my ceremonial gear, and you have nothing else to do while your ship gets fixed." Jake looked at his friend's serious face. Carlos had always been the ambitious one, dreaming of representing humanity in the galactic government. Jake just wanted to fly his roots and help people where he could, but Carlos was right about having nothing else to do. An hour later, Jake found himself walking through the crystal corridors of the Imperial Palace. He wore his usual leather jacket and work pants, feeling completely out of place among the alien dignitaries in their elaborate costumes. His tool belt jangled softly as he followed Carlos toward the great chamber. The palace was ancient beyond human understanding. The walls seemed to glow with their own light, and the air hummed with energy that made Jake's scanner beep softly in his pocket. Everything here was built by the mysterious architects, a race that had vanished long before humans discovered space travel. They entered the great chamber, and Jake stopped breathing for a moment. The room was enormous, with a domed ceiling that showed real stars twinkling in the darkness above. Hundreds of beings from dozens of species filled the space, all focused on the center of the room where the Throne of Eternity waited. The throne was carved from a single piece of dark crystal that seemed to absorb light. It sat on a raised platform surrounded by strange symbols that pulsed with faint energy. Jake's engineering mind immediately began analyzing what he saw. The crystal appeared to be some kind of advanced technology disguised as a simple chair. "Look at all these pathetic creatures," a deep voice rumbled nearby. Jake turned to see Admiral Kethamore of the Brutalics, a massive alien with 4 arms and skin like armor plating. "Especially the humans. They think they belong here with their betters." Several other aliens laughed at this comment. High Sage Yilnara of the Zinthari, whose crystalline body reflected rainbow colors, nodded in agreement. "Humans are barely evolved primates. They only achieved faster-than-light travel a few decades ago. The idea that one of them could rule the galaxy is laughable." Jake felt his face get hot, but Carlos put a warning hand on his arm. They were outnumbered by thousands, and starting a fight would only prove the aliens' point about human primitiveness. More aliens continued to mock humanity as they waited for the ceremony to begin. The Psioni floated in the air like living clouds, their telepathic voices whispering insults directly into human minds. The Eldorians, who claimed to be the oldest race in the galaxy, spoke about humans like they were interesting pets that had learned a few tricks. "They smell like the animals they descended from," hissed Commander Velthar of the Trade Union, his snake-like body coiled around a floating platform. Jake watched the aliens and tried to understand their hatred. Humans were new to galactic civilization, but they had proven themselves in dozens of conflicts and humanitarian missions. Human ships were often the first to respond when colonies faced disasters. Human doctors worked in the worst conditions to help any species that needed medical care. Human engineers solved problems that stumped more advanced races, but none of that seemed to matter here. To these powerful aliens, humans were just young upstarts who did not deserve respect. The ceremony began with ancient rituals that Jake did not understand. Alien priests chanted in languages older than human civilization, while burning strange incense that made the air shimmer. The throne began to glow brighter, responding to the ceremonies like a machine warming up. "The choosing will begin," announced the high priest, an ancient Eldorian whose voice echoed through the chamber. "Let those who would claim dominion over the galaxy step forward and be judged by the Throne of Eternity." Jake expected the most powerful aliens to push toward the throne immediately. But instead they formed an orderly line. Even in their ambition, they followed protocols that were thousands of years old. Each being would get their chance to prove their worth to the ancient artifact. What exactly does the throne do? Jake whispered to Carlos. No one knows for sure. Carlos whispered back. Legend says it can read minds and hearts. It chooses based on worthiness, not strength or intelligence alone. Every emperor who has ever sat on it became a great leader who united the galaxy. Jake studied the throne more carefully. His scanner was picking up complex energy patterns, almost like the throne was scanning everything around it. The crystal seemed to pulse in rhythm with something, though Jake could not figure out what. As the first candidates approached the throne, Jake noticed something else. The aliens who mocked humans the loudest seemed the most nervous about their own chances. They talked big about human inferiority, but their body language showed they were worried about being rejected by the throne themselves. Maybe the throne was more selective than anyone realized. Maybe all the power and status in the galaxy did not automatically make someone worthy of ultimate leadership. Jake watched and waited, not knowing that in a few hours, everything he thought he knew about himself and his place in the galaxy would change forever. The simple cargo pilot was about to become the most important human in galactic history, whether he wanted to or not. General Thaxara of the Hegemony stepped forward first, her 4 massive arms spread wide as she approached the throne of eternity. The Brutalix warrior had conquered 17 star systems and commanded the respect of billions through fear and military might. Her armor gleamed with medals from countless battles, and her scarred face showed the experience of someone who had never lost a fight. I claim the throne by right of strength, Thaxara declared, her voice booming through the great chamber. Under my rule, the galaxy will know order through superior firepower, peace through overwhelming force. She placed her primary hands on the throne's armrests and waited. The assembled aliens held their breath, expecting the ancient artifact to recognize her obvious qualifications for leadership. Thaxara had everything a ruler needed: military genius, unwavering determination, and the ability to make hard decisions without hesitation. The throne remained cold and lifeless. Thaxara pressed harder against the crystal, her secondary arms gripping the back of the seat. Sweat began to form on her forehead as she concentrated, trying to force some response from the ancient technology. The throne's surface did not even warm under her touch. After several long minutes, she stepped back with obvious frustration. The crowd murmured in surprise. How could the throne reject such an accomplished military leader? High Chancellor Velthar slithered forward next, his serpentine body moving with fluid grace. The trade union's most successful negotiator had built economic empires that spanned entire sectors of the galaxy. Planets prospered under his financial guidance, and even the most stubborn species agreed to his trade deals. I offer prosperity to all worlds, Velthar announced, his voice smooth as silk. Under my guidance, every system will flourish through commerce and mutual benefit. Wealth brings stability, and stability brings peace. He coiled his body around the throne's base and placed his hands on the armrests. His economic theories had lifted billions out of poverty, and his trade networks kept the galaxy functioning even during wartime. Surely the throne would recognize the value of his practical approach to leadership. Again, nothing happened. The throne remained as unresponsive as if Velthar were not touching it at all. One by one, the most powerful beings in the galaxy approached the throne of eternity and failed. Dr. Quintel of the Zenthari brought complex mathematical formulas that described perfect governmental systems. Elder Sixmoth of the Eldorians claimed ancient bloodline rights that dated back to the throne's creation. Mindspeaker Yulthes of the Psioni attempted to communicate with the throne telepathically. Each failure brought louder mockery directed at the small group of humans watching from the back of the chamber. Admiral Kethmore laughed the loudest, his booming voice carrying over the crowd. "Look how the primitives cower," he called out. "They know their place among their betters. Perhaps we should make one of them try, just for entertainment value." High Sage Yilnara's crystalline form sparkled with amusement. The maintenance workers might get grease stains on the sacred throne, though I suppose it would be amusing to watch them fail spectacularly. Jake felt his jaw clench as more aliens joined in the laughter. Carlos looked embarrassed by the attention, but Jake was getting angry at the constant insults. Humans had earned their place in galactic civilization through hard work and sacrifice, not through accident of birth or ancient bloodlines. "Maybe we should leave," Carlos whispered. This is getting uncomfortable. But Jake was studying the throne more carefully now. His engineering background helped him notice details that others missed. The throne was not just sitting there doing nothing. It was actively scanning every being that approached it. His scanner picked up complex energy patterns that changed with each candidate. The throne was looking for something specific, something that none of the powerful aliens possessed despite their obvious qualifications for leadership. But what could it be? After 2 hours of failures, the mood in the Great Chamber grew tense. The most qualified beings in the galaxy had been rejected by the ancient artifact, and no one understood why. Some aliens began to whisper that the throne was broken, or that the architects had programmed it incorrectly. Perhaps the throne requires a different approach, suggested Elder Morthak of the Council. The ancient texts speak of worthiness, but they do not define what that means. High Sage Ilnara studied the throne with her advanced sensors. The energy patterns are consistent with proper function. The throne is working correctly. It simply finds all of us unworthy. This statement sent a ripple of unease through the crowd. If the galaxy's best leaders were not worthy, who could possibly claim the throne? Admiral Kethmore's frustration boiled over into rage. This is ridiculous. We are wasting time while the galaxy needs leadership. Someone here must be acceptable to this ancient machine. His angry gaze fell on the humans, and a cruel smile spread across his face. Since we are trying everyone, perhaps the primitives should have their turn. The ceremony laws require that any sentient being may attempt the throne. The suggestion sent the chamber into an uproar of laughter. The idea that humans could succeed where the galaxy's elite had failed struck most aliens as the height of absurdity. Let the animals embarrass themselves, called out Commander Velthar. At least it will provide some amusement while we figure out why the throne is malfunctioning. Carlos looked terrified at the suggestion, but Jake found himself curious despite the mockery. The throne's scanning patterns had been fascinating to watch, and he wondered what it was actually looking for in a potential emperor. I'll try, Jake said quietly. The laughter stopped abruptly as aliens realized he was serious. Carlos grabbed his arm in panic. Jake, you can't be serious. This is not a joke. But Jake was already walking toward the throne, his tool belt jangling softly in the sudden silence. He had spent his entire career solving problems that stumped other people. Maybe it was time to see if he could solve this one too. The crowd of aliens watched in stunned disbelief as the simple human cargo pilot approached the most powerful artifact in galactic history. None of them could imagine what was about to happen next. Jake walked up the crystal steps toward the throne of eternity, while hundreds of aliens watched in stunned silence. The mockery had stopped, replaced by curious disbelief that any human would dare attempt what the galaxy's most powerful leaders had failed to achieve. His engineering mind continued analyzing the throne's energy patterns as he approached. The scanner in his pocket was picking up increasingly complex readings, almost like the ancient artifact was becoming more active in response to his presence. That was interesting. The throne had not shown this level of activity with any previous candidate. This is waste of time, Admiral Kethmore rumbled from the crowd. The primitive will touch the throne, nothing will happen, and we can move on to more serious candidates. High Sage Yilnara's crystalline form sparkled with analytical interest. Actually, observe the energy fluctuations. The throne is responding differently to this human's approach. I was curious. Jake ignored the comments and focused on what his instruments were telling him. The throne was not just a simple test of worthiness. It was a sophisticated scanning system that analyzed neural patterns, emotional responses, and decision-making processes. The architects had built something far more complex than anyone realized. As he reached the top of the platform, Jake could see the intricate details carved into the throne's surface. The symbols were not just decoration. They were part of an advanced interface system that connected directly to the user's nervous system. This was technology beyond anything currently known to galactic civilization. What are you waiting for, human? Called out Commander Velthar. Touch the throne and be done with this embarrassment, Jake placed his hand on the armrest. The world exploded into light energy cascaded through every crystal, conduit built into the great chamber's walls. Ancient systems that had been dormant for 3 millennia suddenly roared to life with a sound like distant thunder. Holographic displays materialized in the air showing star charts of the entire galaxy, trade routes, population centers, and resource distributions. The throne's neural interface connected with Jake's mind, and 3,000 years of galactic history poured into his consciousness in a flood of images and information. He saw the rise and fall of empires, the development of interstellar civilization, and the careful balance of power that kept hundreds of species from destroying each other. But more than history, he experienced the memories and intentions of the architects themselves. They had not built the throne as a symbol of conquest or dominance. They created it as a tool for true leadership, a device that could identify individuals with the rare combination of qualities needed to guide galactic civilization. The throne was not looking for strength or intelligence alone. It sought something the architects called the guardian's heart, the ability to see problems in terms of people rather than power, the wisdom to sacrifice personal gain for the greater good, and the courage to make difficult decisions based on compassion rather than convenience. Jake understood now why all the powerful aliens had failed. They approached leadership as a means to impose their will on others. General Thaxara saw rule through military force. High Chancellor Velthar viewed it as economic control. Even the wisest Xanthari and most ancient Eldorians thought of the throne as a prize to be claimed. But Jake had never wanted power over anyone. His years as a cargo pilot had taught him that every world, every station, every ship contained real people with real needs. When colonies faced food shortages, he delivered supplies. When medical stations ran low on medicine, he made sure they got what they needed. When pirates threatened remote settlements, he helped coordinate defense efforts. He had spent his entire career serving others without seeking recognition or reward. The throne recognized this quality and responded to it. The assembled aliens watched, in terror and amazement, as the human they had mocked, moments before, became the focal point of power that had remained dormant for millennia. Some dropped to their knees in instinctive submission. Others fled toward the exits in panic. Many simply stared in disbelief at the impossible sight before them. Admiral Kethmore's face twisted with rage. This is impossible. The throne is malfunctioning. No primitive human could be worthy of galactic leadership. But High Sage Yilnara studied the energy readings with growing understanding. The patterns are consistent with successful activation. The throne has chosen correctly according to its programming. Jake felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders like a physical burden. Through the neural interface, he could sense the needs and problems of billions of beings across the galaxy, planets struggling with resource shortages, colonies threatened by natural disasters, trade disputes that could escalate into wars, and dozens of other crises that required immediate attention. The throne showed him that galactic leadership was not about commanding others. It was about coordinating and facilitating cooperation between species that might otherwise destroy each other through misunderstanding and conflict. As the initial shock wore off, Jake began to understand the full scope of what had just happened. He was no longer a simple cargo pilot fixing broken engines and delivering supplies. The ancient artifact had chosen him to become the most powerful individual in known space, responsible for the welfare of trillions of beings. I never asked for this, he said quietly, though the throne's interface let him speak to the entire chamber. Neither did any worthy leader, replied a voice. That seemed to come from the throne itself, or perhaps from his own understanding of what leadership truly meant. At the aliens in the Great Chamber faced a choice that would define the future of galactic civilization. They could accept the throne's selection and follow a human emperor, or they could reject the ancient artifact's wisdom and plunge the galaxy into chaos. Some had already made their decision. Commander Zixtal of the Corvani stepped forward and knelt before the throne. The seat of eternity has chosen. I pledge my loyalty to Emperor Jake Morrison. But others were not ready to accept human leadership. Admiral Kethmore's four hands clenched into fists as he backed toward the chamber's exit. This is not over, he growled. No human will rule the Brutalix Empire. Jake watched him leave and felt the first stirrings of the conflicts that would define his reign. The throne had chosen him, but that was only the beginning. Now he had to prove that a simple cargo pilot could unite the galaxy's fractured civilizations and bring peace to species that had been fighting for millennia. The weight of the crown was heavier than any cargo he had ever carried. The rebellion began before Jake had even left the Great Chamber. Admiral Kethmore's war fleet was already moving toward Nexus Prime. while High Sage Yilnara worked frantically to form a coalition of species that refused to accept human authority. The news of Jake's selection had spread across the galaxy in hours, triggering massive protests on dozens of worlds. "The Brutalix Empire will never bow to a primitive human," Admiral Kethmore declared in a broadcast that reached every inhabited system. "We demand a new choosing ceremony with only qualified candidates." Jake sat in the throne room, still overwhelmed by the ancient artifact's neural interface. The throne continued feeding him information about galactic affairs, showing him problems that previous emperors had ignored or failed to solve. The sheer scope of suffering and conflict across known space was staggering. Carlos paced nervously in front of the throne, his diplomatic training warring with his fear for his friend's safety. "Maybe you should step down voluntarily. Let someone else deal with this mess before it turns into a full-scale war." But Jake was beginning to understand why the throne had chosen him. The previous emperors had ruled from Nexus Prime, making decisions based on reports and statistics rather than direct observation. They had become isolated from the real problems facing ordinary citizens across the galaxy. "I need to see what's actually happening out there," Jake said, standing up from the throne for the first time since his coronation. Captain Lisa Parker, the human military officer assigned to his security detail, looked alarmed. "Your Majesty, it's too dangerous to leave Nexus Prime right now. Half the galaxy is in open revolt." Jake almost laughed at being called Your Majesty, but the title came with responsibilities he was only beginning to grasp. Through the throne's interface, he could see real-time reports from across the galaxy, mining colonies where workers were dying from preventable accidents, agricultural worlds where crop failures threatened billions with starvation, frontier stations under attack from pirates while the nearest military forces were days away. "That's exactly why I need to go," Jake replied. "These people need help now, not after we finish fighting about who gets to sit on an old chair." The throne's ancient defense systems had awakened along with its selection protocols. Guardian ships that had protected Nexus Prime for millennia emerged from hidden bases, their technology far advanced beyond anything currently used by galactic civilizations. But Jake knew that superior firepower alone would not solve the crisis facing his reign. His first destination was the Kepler mining colony, where a cave-in had trapped 300 workers of mixed species underground. The local authorities had requested help days ago, but their messages had been lost in the chaos following the Emperor's death. Jake took a small rescue ship and flew there personally, bringing medical supplies and emergency equipment. The colony supervisor, a gruff Zenthari named Jexitar, met Jake at the landing pad with obvious skepticism. "You're the human who claims to be Emperor? You look like a maintenance worker." "I am a maintenance worker," Jake replied, shouldering a heavy equipment pack. "Let's go fix this problem." For the next 18 hours, Jake worked alongside rescue teams from multiple species to reach the trapped miners. His engineering experience proved invaluable in stabilizing the collapsed tunnels, while his cargo pilot background helped coordinate supply deliveries to the rescue site. When they finally broke through to the trapped workers, Jake was covered in dust and exhaustion, indistinguishable from any other member of the rescue team. But the miners recognized something in his eyes that they had never seen from previous galactic leaders: genuine concern for their welfare. "The Emperor himself came to dig us out," whispered Velnora, a Brutalix miner whose forearms had been injured in the collapse. "When has any ruler ever risked their life for common workers?" Word of Jake's personal involvement in the rescue spread quickly across galactic news networks. While Admiral Kethmore's fleet continued its approach to Nexus Prime, ordinary citizens on hundreds of worlds began to see their new emperor in a different light. Jake's next stop was the agricultural world of Harvest Prime, where a fungal blight was destroying crops that fed 17 star systems. The planetary government had been too proud to ask for help, believing they could solve the crisis independently. Jake arrived with Dr. Ben Richardson, a human xenobiologist who specialized in cross-species agricultural problems. "The blight is spreading faster than our containment efforts," admitted Prime Minister Tolvak, an elderly Eldorian whose family had farmed these lands for centuries. "We may lose the entire harvest." Dr. Richardson examined the infected crops while Jake talked with local farmers about their observations. The solution came from combining human agricultural techniques with native Eldorian soil management practices, creating a treatment that stopped the blight spread within days. Our people will not starve because of human ingenuity and Emperor Morrison's quick response, Prime Minister Tolvok announced to his planet. Perhaps we have judged humanity too harshly. Each world Jake visited brought new supporters to his cause, but also new challenges. The Pirates' Haven asteroid field had become a base for raiders attacking civilian shipping lanes. Instead of simply ordering military strikes that would have killed thousands of civilians living in the asteroids, Jake negotiated directly with the pirate leaders. Many of the raiders were refugees from wars and economic collapses that previous governments had ignored. Jake offered them legitimate work in the new Imperial Reconstruction Corps, using their knowledge of remote space to help establish supply routes to isolated colonies. Commander Zixtal of the Corvani became one of Jake's most valuable allies during these missions. The reptilian officer had served previous emperors and recognized the difference in Jake's approach to leadership. Other rulers commanded from their palaces. Zixtal observed as they coordinated relief efforts for a space station damaged by solar flares. You lead from the front lines. This is why the throne chose you. But not everyone was convinced by Jake's hands-on approach. High Sage Ilnara had assembled a coalition of Zenthari, Psioni, and Eldorian systems that demanded his removal from power. They argued that galactic leadership required intellectual sophistication and cultural knowledge that no human possessed. The primitive may mean well, Ilnara declared in a broadcast to coalition worlds, but good intentions cannot substitute for proper education and breeding. The galaxy requires leaders who understand the complexities of interstellar civilization. Admiral Kethmore's fleet had reached the outer edges of the Nexus Prime system, while coalition ships took positions throughout the galaxy to enforce a blockade against Imperial authority. The rebellion was entering its final phase, and Jake would soon face his greatest test as Emperor. As he returned to Nexus Prime after weeks of crisis management across the galaxy, Jake found the throne room filled with reports of the growing conflict. Captain Parker briefed him on military dispositions while Dr. Richardson provided updates on the humanitarian crises they had been addressing. The rebels control 60% of the major shipping routes, Parker reported. They're demanding another choosing ceremony with only qualified candidates allowed to participate. Jake sat down in the throne and felt its neural interface reconnect with his mind. The ancient artifact showed him the scope of the rebellion, but also something else. The growing support among ordinary citizens, who had witnessed his leadership firsthand. The galaxy was about to discover whether a human cargo pilot could unite fractured civilizations through strength of character rather than force of arms. Admiral Kethmore's massive war fleet filled the space around Nexus Prime like an iron curtain of destruction. 200 Brutalix battleships hung in formation, their weapons trained on the Imperial Palace while smaller ships moved to blockade all orbital traffic. The Admiral himself broadcast demands for Jake's immediate surrender from the bridge of his flagship. The Bone Crusher, surrender now, human, and we will grant you a quick death. Kethmore's voice boomed across all communication channels. Continue this charade and we will reduce your palace to dust along with everyone inside it. High Sage Ilnara had positioned her own coalition fleet throughout the outer system, ready to support the Brutalix assault while maintaining plausible distance from the actual violence. Her crystalline ships hummed with charged particle weapons capable of cracking planets, and her telepathic allies had jammed most communication networks to prevent Jake from calling for help. In the throne room, Captain Lisa Parker studied tactical displays that showed the hopeless odds facing the Imperial forces. We have maybe 30 ships that can fight, and most of those are ancient Guardian vessels that haven't been tested in actual combat for centuries. Jake sat in the throne of eternity, feeling its neural interface provide him with real-time information about the crisis. The ancient artifact was showing him something that his military advisors could not see: a massive humanitarian disaster developing in the outer rim systems that would kill billions if not addressed immediately. 3 days ago, the star Rigel 7 had gone supernova, destroying everything in its immediate vicinity and sending deadly radiation waves toward 17 inhabited systems. The previous Emperor's death and the subsequent power struggle had delayed any coordinated response to the disaster. Millions of refugees were fleeing in whatever ships they could find, while entire planets faced slow death from radiation poisoning. Admiral Kethamore's rebellion is not our real enemy, Jake announced, surprising everyone in the throne room. The real enemy is time. We have maybe 72 hours to evacuate the Rigel systems before the radiation kills everyone who cannot escape. Dr. Ben Richardson pulled up astronomical data on his tablet. The Emperor is right. The radiation front will hit Sanctuary Station first, then spread to the other inhabited worlds. We need every available ship for evacuation efforts. But Captain Parker looked at the tactical displays with growing concern. Your Majesty, we cannot organize a rescue operation while under attack from the largest military force in the galaxy. Kethmore will interpret any fleet movement as a hostile action. Jake stood up from the throne and walked to the great windows overlooking Nexus Prime's capital city. Below, millions of beings from hundreds of species went about their daily lives, unaware that their Emperor was about to make a decision that would define the future of galactic civilization. Prepare every available ship for humanitarian operations, he ordered. Medical vessels, cargo haulers, passenger transports, even personal spacecraft. Send them all to the Rigel systems with maximum evacuation capacity. Sir, that will leave Nexus Prime completely defenseless, Parker protested. Kethmore can destroy the palace the moment our Guardian ships leave the system. Jake smiled grimly as he activated the palace's main communication array. It was time to show the galaxy what kind of leader the throne had actually chosen. His broadcast reached every ship in the Nexus system, every planet in the Rebellion Coalition, and every inhabited world across known space. The simple cargo pilot looked directly into the camera and spoke with the quiet authority of someone who had never sought power, but accepted its responsibilities. Admiral Kethmore, High Sage Yilnara, and all leaders of the Rebellion Coalition, I am speaking to you directly. While you waste time and resources fighting over who gets to sit in an ancient chair, 17 star systems are facing extinction from the Rigel supernova. Billions of innocent beings will die unless we act immediately. Jake gestured to the displays showing the developing disaster. I am ordering every available Imperial ship to the Rigel systems for emergency evacuation operations. This includes our defensive fleet around Nexus Prime. If you want to destroy the palace and kill me, you will have a clear opportunity in approximately 6 hours. The transmission showed real-time images of the refugee crisis developing in the Outer Rim. Overcrowded ships limping away from radiation zones, orbital stations overwhelmed with evacuees, and entire planets desperately requesting assistance that was not coming because of the political crisis. But I challenge you to consider what your actions say about the kind of leaders you claim to be. Jake continued. Are you the type of beings who would let billions die while you fight for personal power? Are you willing to let children suffer because you refuse to accept the throne's choice? He paused, letting the images of desperate refugees fill the screen. I am going to Sanctuary Station personally to coordinate evacuation efforts. You can follow me there and help save lives, or you can stay here and explain to history why political ambition was more important than preventing genocide. The transmission ended, leaving the assembled fleets in stunned silence. Within an hour, Jake's small rescue ship was heading toward the Rigel systems with a convoy of every available Imperial vessel. Behind them, Nexus Prime lay defenseless, protected only by automated defense satellites and the moral weight of Jake's challenge. Admiral Kethmore stood on his bridge, watching the Imperial fleet disappear into hyperspace. His tactical officers waited for orders to advance on the undefended palace, but the Admiral found himself paralyzed by an unexpected emotion. Shame. Sir, should we proceed with the attack? Asked his second-in-command. Kethmore looked at the images still playing on his screens showing Brutalic civilians among the refugees fleeing the radiation disaster. His own species had settlements in the affected systems, and those people would die if the evacuation failed. No, he said quietly.
Change course for the Rigel systems.
All ships. His officers stared in shock. Sir, this is our chance to end the humans' reign and restore proper order to the galaxy. Look at those refugees, Kethmore growled, his 4 arms gesturing at the displays. Half of them are Brutalics. The human emperor is risking his life to save our people, while we prepare to stab him in the back. What does that make us? High Sage Yilnara received reports of the Brutalics fleet's course change with growing dismay. Her carefully planned rebellion was falling apart because Jake Morrison had done something no previous emperor had ever attempted. He had put the welfare of ordinary citizens above his own survival. Her crystalline, Ships held position around Nexus Prime for another hour, before she finally gave the order that ended the rebellion. All Coalition vessels will proceed to the Rigel systems for humanitarian operations, she announced with bitter reluctance. The human may be primitive, but he understands priorities that apparently escaped our attention. The next 72 hours became legend in galactic history. Human, Brutalix, Xanthari, Psione, and dozens of other species worked together in the largest rescue operation ever attempted. Admiral Kethmore's warships carried millions of refugees to safety, while High Sage Yelnara's coalition provided logistical coordination that saved entire planetary populations. Jake himself spent 3 days without sleep, personally piloting rescue missions into the most dangerous radiation zones. When Admiral Kethamore's flagship was caught in a gravitational anomaly while evacuating Sanctuary Station, Jake took a small ship into the unstable zone to save the Admiral and his crew. Why would you risk your life for someone who tried to destroy you? Kethamore asked as Jake's ship pulled the Bone Crusher to safety. Because that's what leaders do, Jake replied simply. They take care of their people, even when those people don't like them very much. The evacuation succeeded with minimal casualties, but the real victory was what happened afterward. Admiral Kethmore formally pledged the Brutalix Empire's loyalty to Emperor Morrison, followed quickly by High Sage Yilnara and the Coalition systems. You have proven that true strength comes not from weapons or intellect alone, but from the courage to serve others, Yilnara admitted during the formal surrender ceremony. The throne chose correctly. Jake returned to Nexus Prime as the undisputed emperor of the galaxy, but he had no intention of ruling through the traditional methods of previous leaders. Instead, he established a new system of government that emphasized cooperation and mutual aid between species. The throne's ancient wisdom had been proven correct. Sometimes the best leader was not the one who sought power, but the one who accepted responsibility when called upon to serve. Jake Morrison, the simple cargo pilot who had been mocked by the galaxy's elite, had united the stars through compassion, courage, and an understanding that true leadership meant putting others before yourself. Years later, as peace and prosperity spread across known space, historians would mark Jake's reign as the beginning of a new age in galactic civilization. The human who had never wanted to rule had taught the galaxy that the greatest power was the willingness to sacrifice for the greater good.